Well, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. As schools across the state continue to prepare for students to come back to school, we wanted to share some of the challenges as well as some of the innovative approaches taken by Iowa schools. Again, I want to thank the Iowa School Board, school administrators, teachers, and parents for the outstanding work underway in communities large and small to ensure that our schools are reopened safely and responsibly. As we've said a number of times, schools are about much more than just math and reading. For so many students, they provide everything from a safe learning environment to a hot meal, a caring mentor to critically important mental health services. We simply cannot afford to let our students in the most challenging situations fall behind. One school district that faces some of those challenges is Cardinal Community School District in Southeast Iowa. It's located in Wapello County, and they serve the communities of Agency, Batavia, Bladensburg, Eldon, and Selma. This is a rural school district that faces some significant hurdles in terms of poverty, which impacts the very important work that they do on a daily basis, and it really has forced the team to think creatively. We're pleased today to have three folks from Cardinal Community School District with us. I'd like to start by introducing Superintendent Joel Pedersen, who has made the trip to Des Moines today, and he is accompanied by Bethany, Short, a teacher at Cardinal, and Ellis Kojo, a parent of students in the district. So before I turn it over to Joel, I'd like to also point out that he is the current Iowa Superintendent of the Year, which speaks volumes about the commitment and passion he brings to his job in the Cardinal Community School District. So with that, Joel.
Thank you, Governor Reynolds, for allowing me to speak to the state of Iowa today. I'm starting my 11th year at Cardinal Community School District. I serve great families and great kids. We also have 59% of our students that qualify for free and reduced. That creates lots of challenges, and if we can't get them back to school, it's certainly going to be tough. My school board and I plan on bringing back all of our students and also giving a virtual option to parents that have concerns. You might be wondering why my school board and I want to come back 100%. What keeps me up at night is thinking about my kids that don't have internet. We're working on that, but that's a challenge. I worry about not having eyes on kids. We know from the research that abuse issues are often found or reported at schools. Doctors do that, but schools play an important role in making sure kids stay safe. And when we don't see them, it's very difficult to do. We are prepared to offer a quality virtual option, but that can't replace us getting to see our kids, notice the things they need, perhaps a new pair of shoes, perhaps other things, making sure that they get a quality meal, making sure that their mental health is important, making sure of all those basic needs are being met, and then we focus on reading and math. Those are the things that can't happen if we don't have our kids at school. I also want to make sure that everyone understands that we'll be flexible. We know that there's going to be challenges that come up. We're working closely with public health, and we're getting guidance that allows us to make changes if need be, allows us to go to a hybrid model, to go to virtual if those numbers show that. And we'll be flexible. But we want to start with bringing our kids back to school because we need to see them. We need to be able to see how they're doing. We need to be able to check in on them, and we haven't seen them since March. And we know that it's not just one or the other. I think sometimes we focus on only what COVID can do, but there are so many health issues that are happening by not having kids at school. We are a safety net. We are a safety net for our kids, we're a safety net for our families, and we have to get our kids back to be able to support them in so many things that they need. So my message really is, it's not just one, it's not just the other, it really is there's so many things that are happening. And that's really coming from the heart when I talk about that, because I see these kids and families that need schools to support them. They're working hard, but we also need to be there for our parents too, and let them get back to some normal. A couple of things I'd like to say too is I want to say thank you to my faculty and my staff. their positivity during this time as we prepare to go into some unknowns. I know they have anxiety, I know they're worried, but I want to say thank you because we're meeting with them regularly, and I can't tell you how impressed I am with how they are preparing to get the kids back. You're going to hear from one of my rock star teachers, Bethany, here, and she's going to talk about how excited she is. But I just want to say thank you to my faculty and staff that are out there listening. I want to end with saying this. During this time, I ask all Iowans to give grace to their educators, to their educational leaders. There are no perfect answers here. There are no solutions that we know are going to work 100%. But we need you to give us grace. We need you to call us if you have concerns. We need you to stop in and see us where we can share our plans. Positivity is needed more than ever, and I think that we can rise to this challenge with flexibility as we move forward. I want to thank Governor Reynolds once again for allowing me to speak, and I want to say I can't wait to see my students on August 26th at Cardinal Community School District.
Thank you, Joel. I appreciate that very much. And now I think we have the opportunity to hear from an educator, Bethany Short.
Thank you, Governor Reynolds. Also, I want to say thank you to Joel for the nice things that you said. That was very kind. As I said, my name is Bethany Short, and I am a teacher in the middle school setting at Cardinal. I'm entering into my 6th year at Cardinal, and I'm so excited because I get to work with students who typically struggle in the area of social and emotional regulation. The name of my program is SEAL, and typically you would say that I work in a BD or behavior disorder setting. However, I prefer SEAL because it is more socially acceptable to understand that social and emotional learning comes first and then academics come second. The number one question that I'm asked when I talk about teaching is, how do you do it? Bethany, how do you teach those kids? And I'm really excited to say that I love my job. My heart is 110% invested in Cardinal Community School District, and I super enjoy working with kids who make enormous leaps and bounds. Much like kids, though, teachers crave consistency. As an adult, I crave the structure and the routine and the procedure behind going to school. You know, some kids act reluctant to go back, even my own children, but I truly believe that face-to-face learning is what's best for our students right now in my home. However, Mr. Pedersen did say that we have both options and you have to choose what's right for your family. You know, I've talked with all of my students' parents and I am getting 100% of my kids back. So I'm really excited because that says something about the way that they feel about me and my district. I've seen some of my kids in the community, and the way that they've embraced me physically has been wonderful. The smiles on their faces, the questions they have for me, and the way that they relate to my home life just shows me that they're ready to see me again and that they need me. You know, as humans, I believe that we're built for community. We were meant to do this together, and I think that what's best for us is to continue to see each other face to face in person. I am so fortunate to work in a district that's intentional. Mr. Pedersen and his administration team have been really wonderful about creating a committee that would look super intentionally into the gaps and the different things that would be needed for us to return in a safe way. And I can tell you all about our plans and the things that I'm doing, the tape that I'm putting on the floor, but I think what's most important is that our administration team has sought counsel from not only our school board, but our students, our staff, our community members, our business owners, and even the government. And I think that says a lot about how he feels about his community. And last but not least, the most important thing that you need to know about Cardinal and the way that we return is that it's a community that cares about your students and they care about the way that they are learning and the success that we might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bethany. I appreciate that very much, and it certainly shows the heart of the teacher. And Rockstar was probably a pretty good description of Bethany Short. And so we've heard from an administrator and a teacher, and it's really important also that we have an opportunity to hear from a parent. And so joining us today is Ellis Kojo to talk about just your thoughts from a parent's perspective.
First off, I'd like to thank you, Governor Reynolds, and Joe Pedersen for allowing me the opportunity to give you my perspective this morning. I'm the father of 2 children in the Cardinal Community School District. My oldest son is 6 years old and will be starting first grade this fall. I also have a 3-year-old boy who will be in preschool. This past March, all of us were racked with uncertainty as we became familiar with the coronavirus that has become a part of our everyday life. Since then, we have learned much more about the virus and how it affects us as a community. I respected and understood the need to close the schools since we were dealing with an invisible, unknown enemy. However, that closure came at a price. My son and countless other children never completed their school year. How much learning was lost over the 50 to 60 days that the schools had to close their doors? I'm not sure that loss can be calculated. My oldest son, Jacob, is a bright, imaginative, curious boy who displays a near insatiable thirst for learning to go along with a pretty intense competitive streak. I can't put into words the disappointment that he felt when my wife and I had to tell him that he could not attend any more kindergarten classes because of what he calls a stinky virus. As much as I love Jacob, he's not perfect. None of us are. And he possessed some aspects that could have used some refinement and improvement before the school year came to an end. I know my son is not alone in that regard. I have the deepest admirations for teachers and what they do. They'll be faced with the unenviable task of greeting new class of students and teaching them new material while making sure the gap that was created by the shutdown doesn't widen. There has to be a balance between getting our kids back to school and protecting ourselves from the virus. I believe my kids can go to school and be safe. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC have both recommended that children should go back to school in the fall. And I have faith that our superintendent, Joel Pedersen, who also has children at Cardinal, has everyone's safety in mind as we carefully and cautiously start a new school year, which will be unlike any that we have experienced. I expect a couple bumps along the way, but I can't think of a better person to lead us through any difficulty than Joel, who I've known to be a great educator, innovator, and friend. And thank you so much for allowing me to speak, Governor Reynolds, and God bless.
Oh, thank you so much. Ellis, Bethany, Joel, thank you very much for joining us today, both virtually and in person. We appreciate the work that you're all doing at Cardinal and wish you all the best for a safe and successful school year. And I think, as you indicated, we have to be flexible. Things are changing on a daily basis, and we can't guarantee that we won't get maybe a positive case, but we have procedures and practices in place in how we're going to address that moving forward. So it is, as you mentioned too, Joel, it's going to be a school year unlike any other. And again, flexibility, I think, is going to be, and just grace, I think, are 2 things that we have to keep in the forefront. By working together and staying focused on our goal of serving Iowa students and families, I just absolutely know that we can make it through the uncertainty. And Cardinal's story isn't unique in terms of local school districts working diligently to develop return-to-learn plans focused on in-person instruction while giving parents the option of online learning for their kids. The vast majority of Iowa school districts are also making it work within the parameters of state law. For those that haven't yet finalized their plan, we do continue to work with them and explain the various options that are available to them. Director Lebo and the folks at the Iowa Department of Education have been doing some great work, and she has some good news on both she'll kind of update you on some of the things that they've been working on with the school districts, and then some update on the PPE and federal grants front as well. So with that, Director Lebo.
Thank you, Governor Reynolds. As you just heard, schools are doing extraordinary work to open safely, and the new normal calls for creating as much opportunity as possible for students to succeed while mitigating the risk of COVID-19. As districts design their return-to-learn plans, we are seeing many models of layered mitigation strategies to support staff and students as school leaders work to design safe and appropriate learning environments within the physical spaces they have, while also exploring new possibilities for maximizing the potential use of alternate locations. while some schools can more comfortably social distance than others. Others will need to be more creative in designing classroom layouts that maximize social distancing to the extent possible and are further supplemented by the use of facial coverings or plexiglass dividers, for example, or alternate homeroom structures that allow students to remain in cohorts while staff rotate, or connect through an online learning platform with scheduled one-on-one opportunities for direct learning support as needed. To help ensure schools have PPE to start the school year, we have partnered with Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management to survey the needs of schools and provide as many of the requested supplies as possible, such as masks, gloves, and face shields, with deliveries anticipated as early as next week. The department also is providing schools free access to the Canvas learning management system to deliver their own online instruction to students and will reimburse schools that have purchased other learning management platforms at the same rate as Canvas. To further expand access to online learning, the department will be announcing grant amounts for schools from the $26.2 million federal Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund to pay for Wi-Fi hotspots, internet services, and devices for eligible families. In addition, Iowa just won $17.7 million federal Rethink Education grant, which will help us establish and support a long-term sustainable platform for eLearning Central to empower students, teachers, and families by providing access to high-quality virtual K-12 learning statewide, regardless of geographic location. The department has also offered more flexibility this fall for how districts can use their teacher leadership and compensation systems to meet pandemic-driven needs, including allowing teacher leaders to fill in as substitutes or take on other temporary roles. Finally, I want to take this moment to publicly thank our school nurses. Their integral role as school leaders in public health is clearer than ever right now, bridging continuity of healthcare from home to school for the children and families they serve, and we are incredibly grateful for the important role they play in supporting the many essential services for our schools. Thank you to the many partners who are working together to help our schools open safely for our students, staff, and families, and thank you for Cardinal for speaking today and sharing their inspiring stories. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate the ongoing work from you and your team in maintaining a strong working partnership with school districts. I want to quickly go through some of the numbers for today before we wrap up. Today, I'm pleased to announce that more than 500,000 Iowans have now been tested for COVID-19 for a per capita rate of 1 in 6 Iowans. Our all-time positivity rate is, as of yesterday, was 9.3%, which means nearly 91% have tested negative, a total of more than 452,000 Iowans. So far this week, our statewide average positivity rate is down to 6.5% from last week's average of 8%, and we're monitoring it closely to see if the trend continues. Those of you tracking the trends may have noticed a slight decrease in the numbers of individuals tested, and that is not a result of any capacity or supply issues through Test Iowa or the state hygienic lab. We actually had a higher demand for testing after the July 4th holiday, and this likely represents some leveling out, and probably as people get ready to go back to school, we might see that tick up a little bit. But I think the main message that I want to get across is it is not a capacity or supply issue. So I would encourage anyone that's experiencing symptoms or maybe planning to visit an elderly relative in the future to visit testiowa.com and schedule a test today. And soon there will be even more testing options, more options for testing through Test Iowa. So hopefully next week we'll have another announcement or update on that as well. I also want to announce that our state coronavirus website now includes the county by county 14-day average positivity rate for our school districts. Schools and others will be able to check to see where each county stands on this important metric. As you recall, the 14-day rolling positivity rate along with absentee rates will be key metrics for school districts. So right now, I think there are about 7 counties that meet or exceed the 15% 14-day positivity rate. But that number, and that's why it's so important that we continue to work closely with the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health, doesn't always give a complete picture for school districts, which is why the community context will be so important for schools to consider. Webster County, for example, they're one of the counties that today have a 22% 14-day positivity rate. They have had, as you are very well aware of, an outbreak at the state prison there, and that is in a completely contained environment. So at the Fort Dodge prison, they've had 386 positive tests, 354 inmates, 32 staff, out of a total of 768 positive tests in Webster County. And out of the 768, 424 have recovered in a population of 35,000. So that's why it's going to be extremely important, as I said earlier, for schools to work closely with the Department of Education and the Department of Public Health officials to get a good sense of the level of community spread impacting schools and where it's coming from. And it is updated almost instantly, since we all know that COVID-19 is constantly changing. So we're going to continue to provide that information. We'll continue to work with school districts and counties and local public health across the state to make sure that when we're doing the contact tracing and we're taking a look at the context behind those numbers, we're providing them the information that they need to make important decisions. With that, I think we'll open it up for questions.
Governor, the number of outbreaks at long-term care facilities has been slowly increasing over the past few weeks. And in those White House Red Zone Coronavirus Task Force reports, it said that Iowa is a state that should be testing all long-term care staff every week to try to prevent those from happening. Is the state planning to do that? And if not, why not?
Well, actually, we are doing a lot of baseline testing with both residents and staff, and so we're waiting for some of the machines to come in, as well as doing some PCR testing in conjunction with that. So we have been on a daily basis reaching out proactively to our long-term care facilities, and really we've been doing that from the very beginning. I think where we're at today is still about half of where we were with at the highest peak of our long-term care outbreaks. So some of those numbers are reflective of the baseline testing that they're doing, and we're putting procedures in place to really manage that and move forward. And as you know, it's really important too, when we talk about the different phases that we put in place so that we can connect loved ones that have been separated for, months because of COVID-19, and we know how important it is, because it's such a vulnerable population in our long-term care facilities, to make sure that staff is not bringing that in, that if we identify a positive case, that we, get them isolated and make sure that we're doing everything we can, PPE, testing, education, infection control procedures to keep them safe. So yes, that is kind of a long answer. We're working on that. We're doing a lot of it right now. And as we continue to work with the administration on new testing procedures that are coming in, we have to take a look at what that looks like and how we monitor that moving forward.
Governor, your guidance about what to do if there's a positive case in schools, there's details about if someone is directly exposed to coronavirus in the classroom or at the school. For teachers, it says that they can come back to work as long as they are asymptomatic, even though they have a known exposure, while students are asked to isolate or quarantine for 14 days. Why are you letting potentially teachers and staff return if they've had exposure, while acknowledging that teachers are more at risk for serious disease? Where did you come up with
I think it's the guidelines that we followed all along for essential workforce, determined by the federal guidelines, and our teachers absolutely fall into essential workforce. So that guidelines, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Padati, is consistent with what the diets might have changed just a little bit, but have been pretty consistent to what we've had in place for quite some time now for essential workers. But Dr. Padati, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, that's right. This is in accordance with guidance around individuals who could be considered a part of a critical infrastructure workforce. And so there are some federal allowances for individuals who have critical roles, who have had an exposure but remain asymptomatic. That if there's a workforce shortage and if the individual, wants to, we can do things to safely allow some of those critical workers to return to roles, but it includes things like monitoring of symptoms and temperature twice a day, using a face mask, maintaining distance, and of course, having a plan in case they were to become ill. So it's all part of the critical infrastructure worker guidance that we've provided for critical workers in accordance with federal guidelines in a variety of settings.
These experts who are saying that, yes, essential workers do continue to go to work when they have potentially been exposed, but that they need more PPE than just a mask. So is there efforts to provide face shields, other PPE, other protective measures for these teachers if they potentially have to go back if they're exposed?
I think Dr. Bethany actually alluded to that with the proper protective equipment, that they can go back if they're asymptomatic and they can do things, monitor twice a day. I don't know, Caitlin, do you have anything else to add to that? But I think that's accurate.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, it also goes along with what I think some of Director Lebo shared around efforts to get some of that equipment and make it available for school staff.
Yeah. So Caitlin, I'll come right back. So we, as Dr. Lebo, or Director Lebo indicated too, I mean, we're working with school districts to make sure that they have adequate PPE, especially for the first 30 days, and then we're going to continue to work with them on procuring adequate supplies and making sure that they have what they need to keep, to continue teaching in a safe environment. Sorry about that, Kay.
Governor, as more cities and counties debate and some pass masking or face covering ordinances, will you issue a public health proclamation or whatever the proper name for that is, or consult with the Attorney General about action in concert with him through the courts?
So we've been in consultation with the AG throughout the entire process. He has backed up that we don't believe during a public health emergency that the local governments have the authority to supersede what is in place, been put in place at the statewide level by the governor. But let's just be clear, though, too. My message has remained the same throughout all of this, and that is that we encourage Iowans to wear a mask when they're interacting with others and they're unable to social distance. And within that, businesses have the opportunity to choose to require mask in their establishment. Schools can choose to require masks for their students and teachers, and governments can choose to require masks in their buildings. But, I just don't believe that a one-size-fits-all from a government mandate is the right direction. I believe that the goal is to get individuals to help us slow the spread, to help contain and mitigate the virus activity. And we know, as Dr. Bethany has said, and a lot of people, that one of the ways that we can start to slow the spread is by wearing a face covering, social distancing, staying home when you're sick, and just practicing wash your hands often, practicing good health care measures. And we're seeing that. We are seeing that happen with some of the positivity rates. So still right now, we're able to identify where our highest number of positivity rates are occurring. It's still amongst our younger population. It's based on the social activity, I think, probably that's a reflection of that. And so just like we did the other day, we upped the enforcement on the guidelines that we have in place for bars and social gathering. If we need to continue to do by maybe limit the numbers for social gathering based on where we're seeing some of the increased activity, based on the population who's being most impacted, so that we don't see that maybe start to spread out and impact community numbers. The team is watching that very closely too. Then I think those are the actions that we can take that will be more purposeful in helping us really manage and maintain the virus activity across the state of Iowa.
Governor, we've had a couple viewers when the Cardinal School District was coming up to talk, bring up a point that, the Cardinal School District's a small district. We heard from Van Meter, that's also a small district. Des Moines Christian, small school. Are we going to be hearing from some of the bigger districts, and are conditions at some of these smaller districts, aren't they different than some of the larger ones?
Anne, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've been talking about is how different environments allow for different opportunities. And so as even some of our larger schools are surveying their families, as they look at populations that are choosing fully online, they might be dealing with a smaller student population. The requirement in Senate File 2310 to offer the opportunity for in-person instruction 50% of the time really translates to maybe 2.5 days or 2 to 3 days over a 2-week period. So blending those populations with that sort of model does allow a lot of different flexibility, and we're working with schools to figure out what that looks like. When you're looking at classroom sizes and the number of kids, how they are interacting with students and their teachers, there's opportunity there. So I think it depends on the needs of the community, the interests of the families, and how the school leaders are able to look at options to make available opportunities for their kids.
Director Lebo, can you say where the 50% of the time comes from? Because that's not in the law. So it's obviously an interpretation of either you or the governor's office. So can you explain where that came from?
Yep, so in Senate File 2310, Section 9 indicates presumed instruction being in the building, and Section 15 indicates primarily. So the department's interpretation of primarily, it says online learning will not be the primary form of instruction. 50% is a high-level baseline for primarily. So 50% of the time would fall within the guidance of Section 15 of Senate File 2310.
Director Lebo, the governor mentioned community context. If a district came with a request for a waiver with a situation like she mentioned, where the positivity is driven by a situation like the prison, is that a reason to deny a waiver? How are you going to consider that community context when people request waivers?
So I think what we do when those applications come in, we partner with public health to look at the information. I'm not the public health expert, and so we want to make sure we work with them to analyze that information, and then that decision would be made jointly with a response issued to the school from me.
So it's possible if you have a
subjective?
22% spread in your community, you may not qualify for a waiver.
Dr., that would be a public health question. I think you'd want to direct towards them.
But is this a subjective criteria then? If it can be more than 20%, but, well, the community context is different, so,
So what I was talking about earlier, these are guidelines that we are using to base some of the further discussion on whether a school district can move to a classroom, going temporarily to online, or if they hit a certain metric within the discussion, within doing the contact tracing, within talking to the Department of Public Health to understand where the numbers are coming from, what the virus activity looks like. That is a component. Absenteeism is a component of that too, much like the flu season. So, when the guidelines say when they hit this metric and they have 10% absenteeism on the individuals that are in the school building, then that would trigger the opportunity for a temporary waiver. Dr. Padati, am I missing anything that we need to highlight, or what else kind of put some context into what we're looking at when we're working with school districts?
Again, I think I would emphasize that this is a starting point, and I think I would also say again that just like many things, we adjust as we learn more, and our goal in public health is to provide the information that people need to follow practices to keep themselves and their families healthy, and we're going to keep doing that, and we'll adjust as we need to going forward.
Governor, do you think that any of the schools in any of these counties that are now above 15% should start the school year online only?
Well, we're going to continue to take a look at that. We've got a couple of, a week or two before. But yeah, I mean, it would depend on, I need to take a look at the county, like Webster County. Yes, I think that they should make every effort to get those kids back to school. We've listed so many reasons why it is so important. And I believe that we can do this safely and responsibly. I mean, I said this the other day, and I don't mean to say it lightly, but we have kids that are practicing football right now. You know, we have junior high and high school kids that are coming together and practicing sports, and they're figuring out a way to do it safely and responsibly. So I believe that just like Cardinal has done in other school districts across the state, there is a way that we can bring the kids back. We've given parents the option. I don't know what all of the underlying conditions are that their children or their family might be dealing with, so I think it's really important. Educators, we need to have the option for them. If they have underlying condition, there's a different role that they may need to play in delivering education to the students that they serve. But, you know, there are going to be times throughout this because there's so many variables and we've seen it change so much through the 4 months that we've been dealing with COVID. So, and I think I heard from you, we have to be flexible. We have to know that we might have to go online temporarily, and we need to be ready to do that. But I believe that we should all do everything we can to get our kids back in school in the most safe and responsible manner. So,
Should any schools be allowed to, if they're in a county with a
I'm
lot
not
of spread?
I'm not gonna answer hypotheticals right now. We've got guidelines in place. The Department of Education has done a phenomenal job of working with individual school districts. We had a great conversation with the Des Moines Public School Board and Dr. Earhart. He had an internet connection issue, but we were able to continue the conversation with the school board. And, you know, Director Libro brought up a lot of great options or things that they can consider that maybe they hadn't, that we could work with them to get them to the place that they needed to be to meet the state law. Again, we're doing everything we can to help schools comply with the state law. This is not just something that we've thrown together. It is the state law that we are doing everything we can, even providing a flexibility through the proclamation to help them comply and do the right thing in a safe and responsible manner. So that's what we're going to continue to do.